Okay, you can go ahead and introduce yourself, Miss Michaela.
Okay, hi, my name is Michaela Walters. I am the clinical nurse educator for the ICU at Evergreen. I graduated nursing school late 2008 and started working on a cardiac telefloor 2009, switched to a step down unit, and then the ICU in 2006 no, I'm getting my dates wrong, 2012, 2011, 2012. Did ICU bedside nursing and rapid response nursing. And then I moved into education after getting my master's, and I have been here at Evergreen for about a year and a half.
Nice. And you've answered how long have you worked in your current position?
Yeah.
Okay, how long? A year and a half and nursing background. So let's go ahead and go towards our leadership questions. Our first question is, how would you describe your leadership style? And is there something that inspires you to conduct your style that way?
So I think my leadership style is fairly casual and relaxed. I have the benefit of being in a position where I don't have to do the discipline or budget planning that can cause a lot of strife. Where I get to be is mostly a support for staff, where I get to push for patient safety and nurse training and really advocate for them. And so because my role is more advocating and training, I want to make sure that I am very approachable so that staff can come to me with issues so that I know where they need me to help them focus.
What leadership style do you prefer, or like do you advise future nurse leaders to have?
Sure. And you always have to be open as a leader, be able to get feedback that you don't want to hear, and not take that as a personal attack, to be able to take in someone's feelings and kind of reflect on what you're doing. It's not necessarily going to change what you're doing, but you might be able to talk to the team members in a way that acknowledges how they're feeling and make the process a little bit easier for them. I don't think, especially in healthcare, that anything authoritarian is going to work overall. I mean, sometimes there are always things that come down that you're going to have to do, and you have to do them no matter what. But overall, especially in healthcare where there are so many feelings involved and the human factors and everything that we touch, that you have to have a more collaborative approach.
All right. Next question should be towards strategies used in team building and working with interprofessional teams. Question is, how do you make sure your voice is heard when you have something important to say?
Sometimes people will raise their voices, and I've been guilty of it. That is not the most effective way to make sure your voice is heard. In what's nice being in healthcare is we are a science-based community, and so to make sure my voice is heard, I want to make sure I have the science that can back it up. Because here at Evergreen, if it's what is based on best literature moving forward, things like that, if in a certain situation I feel like my voice isn't being heard, I can go to our CNO or our director and say, here's the science, here's the evidence. And sometimes you have to find someone else to help you back up your voice to get those others to hear it. But if it's for patient safety, I'm always going to say my piece.
All right. How about team building? Anything you want to, like, strategies used in team building, just like maybe working as a team, like any strategies you have in mind?
I think it's important to ask everybody in a team, because sometimes, especially so here in healthcare, we've got techs, we've got nurses, we've got physicians, we've got directors. Everybody is going to come into that sometimes with a preconceived notion of someone being more important than someone else in that team. And if you're really trying to create a team that's going to work well, you need to make sure everybody knows that they bring something of value and they need to share that with us.
Thanks, Ms. McKay.
Even if we have to pull it out of them.
Pulled it out of me for sure. So the third is strengths and challenges in team building, which I think you did mention that there are different types of personalities in a team that sometimes you have to pull it out, the strengths, and like maybe encourage those little, or like those sort of weak links in the team. But what are your team strengths and why are they important, do you think?
Like personally, what strength do I bring to the team?
Yeah.
I think I do value everybody's opinion in there. My strength is that I'm not going to get lost in feelings about something. I want to know what is, for all of our conversations here, what is going to be best practice and the safest for our patients. If we're having feelings that are trying to drive best practice and don't necessarily agree with the literature, then we need to, you have to address that in a way that is not, your feelings are stupid. You can say, you have to acknowledge how people are feeling and say like, yeah, I totally, I see where you're coming from and those things are important, but here's how we can do that by following best practice. I don't know if that quite answered the question.
I think so. Yeah. Best practice for sure. And I think emotions can get into the way sometimes, for sure.
And we have to, all of us here at Evergreen, they're in any form of leadership position. Even the charge nurses are encouraged to go up to like the CEO, go to crucial conversations where you have to learn how you have awkward conversations like that, where you can take your feelings out of it to have a conversation to say like, what is really the issue here? What's the joint goal that we can focus on, and how do we work to get to that?
Next question would be, what are the team building challenges and how do you address them? I guess.
So I think that was kind of
yeah,
the feelings.
That's the feelings.
I think
yeah.
the biggest things are feelings that we experience here anyway.
Yeah. Right. Next would be specific leadership contribution to the success of your organization. What are some of the initiatives that you have been part of in this institute?
Sure.
Yeah.
So I do, since I'm in education, I do a lot of the training.
For sure.
And we also did, when I was part of the setting up to move to our new ICU, so some of the,
Yes,
some of the, which opened in July. So some of the equipment and things like that, and reaching out to get opinions on those. And then we do new to specialty training. I also support the education department with all new employee onboarding. And I am currently working on redoing some of our policies around vent sedation and targeted temperature management and daily awakening trials, things like that, ICU liberation.
What are your, how do you say it, like, not suggestions, like, what are your advices for newbies, for new nurses such as me to, like step up with their initiative, like what can, as newbies, we don't really get to offer anything, but what are your suggestions for us?
Well, even if you're new, you still offer a lot because you're in the phase of nursing where you still feel like you're allowed to ask why all the time. And for the love of God, I hope everybody always still asks why all of the time. But especially when you're new, it's kind of expected to ask why. And you're having to look at a lot of policies and a lot of new things. And you can say, but why are we doing it this way? And if someone can't give you a good answer, that gives you an in right there to say, well, how can I make sure that this is really why we should be doing something? And you can help lead a change in the department. And then people see you like, oh, she did that. She made a great change. She's asking questions. You'll kind of grow an informal leadership base from there.
All right. Our next would be strategies in leading to create a positive and engaged workplace culture. For example, how he or she responds to bullying, negotiation, and conflicts. Let me try to check what questions we have here. What kind of strategies are you using to create a positive and engaged workplace culture?
You have to kind of walk a fine line between like friend and leadership and whatnot when you're in a leadership position, where you can't be too silly with people or say things that are like too crazy, but you also have to make sure that you're getting to know them as a person and that there are things about everybody that you value and are worthwhile outside of their role in the organization. That they're not just a nurse, they're not just a tech, that they are a great person, and that we do things to kind of do team building and engage them, which in the time of COVID has been really
Very hard for sure.
But we still try.
We try. Next question would be, how do you manage conflict?
Oh, Lord.
Or maybe you can give an example. What conflict was or what was your most memorable conflict? No?
In this particular role, it was probably between a new employee in training and their preceptor. They were not seeing eye to eye on anything, to the point that someone was going home crying several times. And we basically had to have a sit down with, we sat down with them individually, and we're like, hey, what's going on? Let's see your perspective. And then had to have a discussion where we say, at the start of your shift, to make sure each of you is stating your goals so that you know what we're actually working towards, so that those conflicts were less likely to pop up because everyone was on the same page to begin with.
I have a fire alarm. Okay. Anything you want to add there? Sorry, we got interrupted by this disco lights.
No.
Okay. Next question: what keeps what keeps you awake at night, and what makes you tick about your leadership role?
So, like I said, I am in the education role, which I didn't get into to necessarily be in a leadership role, but it's something that I quickly learned was part of that. And between that and my two small humans, I go to sleep pretty well by the end of the night. But sometimes I do worry, like, there are more things that we could be doing for training, for opportunities and things like that. And it's hard because here on the floor, everybody's so busy that they don't want to take time to come in and do, even a self-guided something. And I don't want to come in for another day to do class. So it's part of what, I guess, kind of doesn't keep me awake, but part of the things that I think about outside of my work hours are, how do we make things more engaging so that we're making sure people have the training and the competence that they need. Yeah.
Okay. How do you handle that? Like, when you get tick off in a day, like, how do you handle this emotions and this stress?
Like I said, the small humans don't allow for much brain space to be used for that.
Okay, all right. Sounds good.
But otherwise, my husband is a wonderful sounding board.
All
If I'm having
right.
concerns, I will talk things out with
Support system.
Yes,
Yeah,
a support system.
Good support
So,
system.
talk things out, especially to a person who's not in healthcare and not in any kind of position similar to mine. He can help me kind of see the forest through the trees to see what's really important and where I really need to focus.
Or which restaurant can make us happy, maybe.
Yes.
Maybe. All right.
Yes.
Next would be, what advice do you have for future nurse leaders? Very broad, very
It
broad
is.
thing.
I mean, you stay open to change, stay open to feedback. Sometimes there's so much, depending on what level of leadership you're at, there's so much like shoved at you. You have to do these changes. You have to do all this stuff, that you need to be able to speak up for your staff below you, to say, whoa, like, we're going to get there, we're going to do these things, but I have to make sure I'm protecting those that I am leading.
All right.
Because you're their advocate.
Anything else you want to? Okay. All right.
Nursing's awesome. Thanks for joining
Nursing is awesome. So, what is the situation where you had to complete a task because coworkers were unable to manage their task? What is the situation where you had to complete a task because coworkers were unable to manage their task?
In this role specifically, again, there's a lot of collaborative work when we have to do onboarding for, like, the resident groups, and we have to do training. If someone's ill or they get pulled to somewhere else, it's not uncommon for one of us to have to step in last minute. And part of working on a team is knowing that if you're going to step in for someone, but if you needed that, there's also someone there to step in for you, and being flexible with that, and knowing that it's all going to come out in the wash. Luckily on our team.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know that's not true in every team, but that's where I'm at right now.
Yeah. And I think that's part of teamwork, right? Like, even if somebody isn't able to do, there should be some person who needs to step up. But
And if you come into a situation where you're constantly working with someone and
Yeah.
they are not doing their stuff and you're having to step in for them over and over and over again,
Mhm.
it's important to have a conversation with them and be like, hey, these were the expectations. Like, are you doing okay? What can we do to, like, make sure you're able
Support.
to do this? And then if that doesn't work, then you get to go, to
Right.
your joint boss and discuss and see how they can help support them.
Yes, support. There you go. Because maybe the reason why they're not doing it is because they do need help.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, that's true.
Not assuming it's a bad thing,
Not,
but
yeah.
coming at it from a more.
Thank you. Next would be, how do you manage coworkers taking a long break? I guess it's the same thing, huh? 'Cause
Yeah, kind
Sort
of.
of.
And in my position, and even like other leadership positions, that's not really. Well, formal leadership positions, you're not going to have the situation where there's a long break and there's no one there, and you're like, hello. That
Mhm.
might come in for like the charge nurses on the floor because they're also in a leadership position and
That's
they
true.
have to cover staff while they're gone on their breaks. I feel like it would be addressed the same way, following up with them and be like, hey, is there a reason that you're not back? Like checking in, maybe they just forgot. So walk into that assuming good intent, and then once you figure out the cause of the delay, kind of working from there to see how you need to address it.
Constantly. Forgot constantly. But it's a,
Yeah,
I got it.
constantly. If it becomes a habit issue, that's when it needs to go to either the assistant manager or the manager, because that's a behavior issue that needs to be
That's true.
addressed. And sometimes if for a long break, if enough people let it slide for long enough, they're like, oh well, that's just what I get to do. And sometimes you have to really call them out on that for them to be like, oh right, okay, that's the expectation, I'm going to go forward. And it wasn't something that they were even potentially aware of.
Yeah. I guess you made a great point. Like, in any conflict or in any, how would you say, like, if a person is not performing well, there are two types of how you deal with it. You either identify it as a knowledge gap,
Right?
a skills gap,
Yep.
or a behavioral gap, which might be the behavioral gap might be like a more difficult pathway to
It is
address.
definitely more difficult of a pathway to address.
But that's where our policies and our HR contracts.
Yep, yep.
All right. Last question would be, how do you manage lateral violation in your workplace? Maybe violence. No?
Yeah, so they're probably talking about like bullying and
Right,
things like
right,
that. On someone who's on essentially the same level as you are. And it's not okay. That's why people leave the workforce. That's why you get teams that don't function correctly, and that's not something that we support. The most important thing with lateral violence is that someone has to speak up and say that it's happening so that they can get other parties who maybe don't have an independent view of what's going on to kind of help walk through that process. If they can't say, when you did this is how I felt, and if that isn't enough to fix it, then they need to have someone else come in to help resolve the situation.
Teamwork. Yeah. Have you ever experienced lateral violence? I guess it is in healthcare. It is unavoidable sometimes because of
Yeah.
the stress, pressure, etc.
Yeah, people will snap or things like that, or just and I think you have to speak up for yourself in those situations. And for those who are a little bit meeker, I think it's a lot easier to fall into a position where you would experience the lateral violence. But even if you don't feel comfortable speaking up in that moment, you need to make sure that you are speaking up to someone so that the issue can be addressed.
All right. I think those are all our questions. Anything else you want to add in terms of leadership skills, or like building good future leaders, future nurse leaders, I guess.
Take all the trainings that are available to you. I know here we have training classes for preceptors, for charge nurses, for frontline leaders, and especially like the communication classes. A lot of conflict comes from
Right.
poor communication. So if we have taken the time to improve our communication skills, we can avoid a lot of issues or talk about them in a healthy way to make it so that they don't grow and get worse.
It's a very good advice. All right. Anything else? I'm gonna add.
I don't think so.
All right.